Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. I just want to talk about some of the comic books I read this week, and a bunch of them lumped together in my mind as being in one way or another a horror comic book. Horror is kind of an interesting format because it can take so many different shapes, be in so many different landscapes, you might say, in a fantasy world, the everyday mundane world, science fiction, so many varieties as I found here in how many of these did I decide were in one way or another horror? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the books I read this week out of 14 felt to me like they dealt in the horror genre or horror way of storytelling. The biggest one, I suppose, the most scary, most disturbing, was Witches, number 4. Witches has been somewhat scary and somewhat intense, but with this issue, it just really cranked it up. And at this point, I'm kind of glad that I'm just reading it issue by issue on a monthly basis rather than in a trade, because I almost feel like I need to decompress after 22 pages of Witches. I need to take a break, and I wouldn't want to plunge on forward. So this is enough nightmares and anxieties for a time. And there's the anxiety of parenthood and of disturbing things out in the woods that will eat your legs off, and children being eaten, and the whole idea of parents forgetting their children, and also the way parents raise children and stuff is also brought up here, and weird, crazy ways of raising children. So I seem to be getting more used to the spatter color effect. I still kind of wish they used it in a little more moderation, but I do feel there's enough of a difference from scene to scene in terms of the color choices and stuff, so that I still feel like I'm getting a good coloring job overall. But anyway, that would probably be, the only thing I could complain about, which is I'd been comparing this to Stephen King. In this issue, it felt scarier than most Stephen King. Whether it'll continue that way, even if it goes back to just feeling like a solid Stephen King-like story really told really well in comic book form, that's enough. If it transcends that, all the better, I suppose, or all the scarier and creepier. So yeah, no idea what's going on the cover really, but it's still kind of scary, like some kind of creepy shadow underneath the ground. So there was that. And then sort of on the other end, but almost as creepy, was Rat God by Richard Corbin. I mean, this cover alone is just highly disturbing. But oddly, the cover doesn't seem to have any connection to this issue. Presumably, we'll see something more of this figure, which I assume is the Rat God, in later issues. I think this is listed as a 5-issue story. Instead, we get this kind of weird time slip between sort of Neolithic American Indians, I believe, who are having a scary enough experience of their own, and then we slip forward in time to, I guess, what looks like the 1920s, where this character seems to encounter modern-day versions of the Indian brother and sister who were in peril and possibly killed in the past sequence. But none of that's explained to us. It's very dreamlike. And this character, who I guess is our protagonist at this point, here, did they give him a name? He seems to be very racist, which is funny because he almost looks African American. But I, after a while, decided he wasn't intended to be, although I wonder if Richard Corbin is playing with that. This guy who perhaps is passing for white, but may not be, and acts very racist. Or is it just some other quirk of the coloring and the way he's drawn. So, yeah, everything has a kind of creepy, dreamlike edge, and yet it's sort of set in the daylight world of the 20s. And there's a certain amount of events seeming to happen at random, yet you get a sense they're really going to be all connected. That makes it kind of dreamlike. And of course there's this narration by Mag the Hag, who just seems to show up throughout the story here and there, even will trip a character up with her staff and then talk to us and be unheard by anyone else. Let's see. Where is it that she trips him up? Maybe that's... I'm not going to be able to find it now. But anyway, the other interesting note about this is if you had a lot of memory of H.P. Lovecraft stories, you'll remember Miskatonic University, and that's the university that this character went to and where he met the reincarnated Indian girl. And the name of the town that he's in is also oh no, I can't find it and I can't remember. Also the name of a town from an H.P. Lovecraft story. So I wonder if in his own weird way, Corbin is trying to make a new H.P. Lovecraft story of his own. He certainly seems to be hinting he's playing with that kind of stuff. So I really loved this. It's except for the cover, it's just so hard to look at. But it's certainly not like anything else. And then Hellboy and the BPRD was good, solid Hellboy, like a lot of other Hellboy, with kind of a minimal approach to dialogue, and leaves you need to be patient and wait to find out everything that's going on. And the artwork seems to be getting better and better by Alex Maleev. At first I wasn't buying into the Alex Maleev artwork so well in the first few issues, but it seems to be working really well for me now. And there's this great scene with a South American Indian talking to an alligator. And they both seem to be actually be mystical beings who know who Hellboy is and what he's predicted to do to Earth. Anyway, it was just an interesting, quirky issue. My only complaint about this is they've expressly set this up as being about a young Hellboy who, while having the body of a man, only has the experience of a child. But we don't see that reflected at all in anything Hellboy's done. Hellboy's role's been kind of minimal. I mean, he's just his usual sort of stoic, slightly bemused, tough guy adventurer in here. He just doesn't play quite as prominent a role as the other members of the BPRD are seemingly more in control of the situation. So yeah, they even kind of emphasize it, that he is, grown to the size of an adult, but with little of an adult's life experience. Now he heads out on his first mission. So they have kind of an idea of the character arc of it, but I don't feel like there's much focus on that character arc. It just seems more like a typical Hellboy story that could be told later in his life as easily as it is being told, as supposedly his first adventure. But still, it's very enjoyable and very well done. And then completely different, but also from Dark Horse Comics, is Ladykiller, the comic book written and drawn by Joelle Jones. And this issue doesn't progress us in the way that I had imagined it would, if that makes sense. So we get more of this stylish killing. You might not think that, you might question, is this a horror comic book or not? You certainly could view it as more of a crime book or some other kind of I don't know, parable of the middle class or something. But to me, it does seem like there's something horrific about the way she kills people, and then we find out that she's been working for this, whoever it is that gives her the assignments to kill, for 14 years, and there's a subtle threat about the fact that she now has a husband and children, threats from her employers about that. We don't know how much power her employers have. Could she kill them, if she wanted? And then it appears that her next assignment is to kill a child. I think. So, so is that to kill this child? Anyway, so it seems like, there's an undertone of quiet horror to her position. Or is there? Is it just black humor? I'm not sure. It'll take a few more issues. But I thoroughly enjoyed this issue still. Love the art, love the color. This is the only other comic, this is the only non-Michael Allred comic I know of where Laura Allred is the colorist, and she's a great choice of colorist. She's perfect with Joelle Jones's artwork and with this subject matter. So, we just go from win to win to win, all great horror comics. I think maybe I suddenly focused on the fact that so much of what I read this week was horror when I heard Stacy Poole, is that her name? Stacy Poole saying that she's discovering that maybe in comics she likes horror. And then I thought, a lot of what I'm reading right now seems to be horror. Swamp Thing, a traditional DC Comics horror comic, got its start as a kind of a monster of the month comic, where the Swamp, way back in the Len Wein Ryston days, where the Swamp Thing would wander the wilderness and encounter one horrific creature after another. Now he's in this much more complicated mythos with the realms of the machine and the realms of the green and the rot and the mold and the fungus, not the mold. And there's one other, isn't there? I can't think of it right now. But this is full of effectively done horrific images, although we kind of know with the Swamp Thing that he'll reanimate. But horrific stuff also happens to other characters, leavened by humor here and there. Beautiful artwork, beautiful color. There's one more issue to go, and it feels like he's right on track. Whoops, that's the preview at the end. Feels like he's right on track to Charles Soule to wrap this up nicely in one more issue, without me knowing exactly how he's going to wrap it up. So it continues to be very satisfying, very imaginative. In that Charles Soule groove that I think of it when he's writing his best work, there's just this lovely flow and rhythm to the issue, and it's kind of delicious as a reading experience. It was nice they brought Hellblazer back in, who has his origins in the Swamp Thing in the first place. Good to bring him in for your final Swamp Thing arc, potentially. I mean, I'm sure that they'll bring back the Swamp Thing again, but at least for now, we can imagine it's the end of the Swamp Thing. So it's of the Swamp Thing saga. So it's nice to have Hellblazer in there one more time, and to have Abby Arcane and Arcane. I have to say, the one question of this whole plot line that I have is Arcane has been brought back by the Machine Queen to help him and be her ally to destroy both Abby and Alex Holland, the Swamp Thing. But I could have sworn he was off in his own little purgatory, and we were shown that in a Swamp Thing annual, and I thought that was the last we were ever shown of Anton Arcane. He should not be back in circulation, unless I missed something where he was freed from that purgatory. But anyway, that's my only quibble, so another excellent comic in the horror vein. Birthright is kind of sword and sorcery, horror, family drama. Family drama lends itself well to horror anyway. It makes everything more horrific. But it's what if the horrific elements of a sword and sorcery story all became won out. The horror wins out. The hero becomes the horror. And then returns to his family in our world. And it's done fantastically, and you can see how wonderful the art and the color are. So I think last issue I was a little less into it, but I'm totally back with Birthright as, you know, one of my, at the forefront of my caring about comics right now. And it's creepy. There's something really disturbing going on here. We got marital problems, the son who's evil, the other son who can see the evil, just all kinds of and the flashbacks are a story about a child in a kind of horrific situation. You know, the fantasy land turned into horror in a way, and we know that he's going to lose and he'll become this corrupted creature here. You know, when we go from his boyhood to, you know, so that's very horrific. So yeah, so I'm counting this in with the horror for this video anyway. And here, Nameless, the latest #1 from Image and the latest book from Grant Morrison, who feels to be very active in the comics field right now, and to me, hitting the mark a lot more than missing. And he's always been a hit-or-miss writer, right, for a lot of people. And I guess I've been seeing on Twitter that some people just didn't really get to Nameless, but I really got into it. It felt like a Hellblazer comic, in a way. I mean, not exactly, but a Hellblazer-ish type of character, you know, or like a character in a Clive Barker book, who is just deep into the world of the supernatural, to the point where he's literally erased his name so that his enemies can't have power over him. And I thought the artwork by Chris Burnham was fantastic. Most of the colors by Nathan Fairburn were quite good. There were a few pages where I thought they were too dark or something. But anyway, I really liked the wacky, mystical horror world that this character Nameless comes out of. And then I really liked that his world, these are kind of the pages where maybe the coloring for me was a little too bland, but his world is going to intersect with this world of outer space and asteroids colliding with Earth and stuff like that. And to me, Morrison set it up really nicely. And I want more, and I want to learn more, and I assume I will learn more. It feels like it would be a limited series. I don't know if they build it as an ongoing or limited or just haven't said. I suppose you could have more adventures of Nameless after he solves this asteroid problem. But anyway, if it just is a miniseries, that'll be fine. And as horror goes, I mean, it has a lot of horror elements, but you're more focused on the psychedelic trippiness of it, I suppose. So you don't even think about the horror, and maybe only rethinking about it and looking at it again. But there's plenty in there to be scared of. But it's just not in your, it hit you in the gut scary so much as a more mental experience. Annihilator, coming 5th out of 6 issues, so the penultimate issue of Annihilator, is a wild, trippy thing, and you could argue whether or not it's horror, but to me it feels like horror because it's about someone dying and losing their mind and losing control and sort of feeling like we are just the crazy experiments of mad gods, so to speak. So to me, the horror element of it ramped up. Here is our hero near death, still being forced to write more. Again, as with the other one, the trippiness and the wildness are kind of distracting from the horror, but the horror is still there. The horror of a life, in a way, lived perhaps not the way you wanted to, and then dying. I don't know. I'm really thoroughly enjoying it. And I could argue another day that it's not horror, that it's something else. That it's metafiction. Or it's, a meditation on science fiction and the life of the writer or something. So anyway, not a single book here that I did not thoroughly enjoy. Of them all, the only one that had a slight weakness to my way of reading was Hellboy and the BPRD, just because it doesn't deliver enough. It's too laid back or something. But other than that, horror and comics go really well, and people are really doing a good job. And I don't even think of myself as someone who seeks out very many horror comics. And here I had 8 in 1 week. Talk to you later.